Hi.
Paola, hi, great to see you. Hi to everyone out there. Um,
Hi, everybody.
Glad
Hi,
everyone
Philip.
can join us. We've got a few people filtering in, and I think
Okay.
there's nearly 300 people signed up to come along today. So let's see how many people pre-Christmas will show up and how many people will watch this later.
How are you doing, Philip?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, as I said, I'm starting to run down a little bit before Christmas, but I've got, just about enough energy to chat to you about interesting language matters and yeah, multilingualism, multiculturalism. Looking forward to that. Before we chat to Paola and I introduce her, let's just talk a little bit about travel. You've been, and I should say, just to everyone out there watching, if you want to say hi and where you're tuning in from, or if you know us, or if you have a question, just say hi in the chat. Yeah, sorry, Paola. So you've been traveling a little bit this year. Tell us about that.
Yeah, actually, I'm an autumn traveler. I don't like traveling in summer. It's too crowded, it's too expensive. So I went to Greece last month to see a friend who actually, well, quite on topic, he moved there because he's learning Greek, which is like his seventh language. And so he
Wow.
he actually we met in Turkey when we were learning Turkish. And so, that's the thing. Like, being a language nerd brings you nerdy friends who travel very much, and then you can go visit them. So I went to Athens, and now I'm in Milan seeing family pre-Christmas, and I'll make my way back to Barcelona tomorrow, actually, back to the sunshine.
How many languages have you spoken this week?
Um, I have spoken Italian, Spanish, English, and French. Four. Yes.
4 languages this week. Well, that's two more than me. I'm here in Las Palmas, Canary Islands, Spain. I
Hmm.
haven't done much traveling this year because I really like it here. So I've been staying here mostly. Been back to the UK a little bit, but next year I may do some traveling to some interesting places.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
What's
I've
the
got some.
plan?
Well, I'm going to Madeira in March for some book promo, and
Hmm.
also I might be going to Mauritius, which is quite exciting.
Mm,
That is not somewhere I've been, and it's a super long flight.
yeah. Actually, I've
Yeah,
never been, and I don't know anyone who's been actually to Mauritius. No language nerds who have gone there. What do they speak in Mauritius, actually? I don't know. Do they speak French, among other
I
things?
I think English is the common language. I might be wrong, but I think
Uh,
they speak several languages in Mauritius.
yeah.
If
Like,
anybody knows, tell us in the chat.
yes, please. What language do they speak in Mauritius? Um, oh, hi, Anna, Monica, Stefan. Oh, these are my peeps. Yay. Hi,
There you go.
Stefan.
People are
Glad to
coming
see
in.
you here. And Anna and Monica. Well, actually, Monica is your girl, but she hangs out on my LinkedIn profile too, and I'm glad to see her here. Hi, Monica.
Yeah, hi everyone. We've got about 20 people live joining us, so yeah, thanks. Keep letting us know where you're tuning in from, and if you have any questions for me or Paola, then just type them into the chat, and we'll get to them towards the end of this session. Now we're going to talk about some of the reasons why your language background is an advantage for you. We often think of it, I know there's a lot of discrimination, there's a lot of issues with employers and, jobs saying, oh, English isn't your first language, so, you're not hired. But there are
Yep.
some advantages as well. And Paola, with her 89 languages or however many she speaks, is quite the expert on that. So why don't you introduce yourself, Paola? Tell everyone who you are, what you do, and then we'll get cracking and ask you some questions.
All right. So my name is Paola Natalucci, and I work as a Neurolanguage coach right now. Well, which I always say is not just a fancy way to say I'm a language teacher. It's actually, it kind of like brings together language teaching and principles of coaching, and that's what makes it so powerful. And I'm really enjoying this new way of doing my job. I've been doing this job for, well, 15 years or more, actually. Time passes. And yeah, and I've done this job. The good thing about being an English teacher, as I'm sure a lot of the people in the audience know, is that it helps you travel. You can go pretty much anywhere. And yeah, even in some, some governments actually play out that discrimination you were talking about. Because, for example, the only reason why I could find a job in an international school in Thailand was that I had 17 million certificates. And that way I could get around what they call the 5-country rule, which is they only hire people from UK, US, Australia, New Zealand, or Ireland. And that's it. Because there's no EU regulation in Thailand, of course. So I worked in Thailand and in Austria, where I met Stefan, who just signed in, and I worked in Argentina, and now I work in Spain, and in Turkey also ages ago. And on the way, I picked up languages, and honestly, like every language that I have entered the space of enriched my life, both personal and professional, because it it gave me concrete opportunities to find jobs, and also freedom to move, and that's not little, I would say.
Yeah, I think both really interesting background. I think both you and I are people who have probably, because of travel and language, have slowly moved towards and like crystallized what we do and how we help people. And I know it probably seems like, if you're from not an Anglophone country, that it might be, a disadvantage. I speak all these languages, but no one's hiring. As you do get older and have more experience across, meeting different people and different cultures and seeing what advantages languages can bring, hopefully it helps you get closer to what you really want to do and like understand that it is an advantage. I think I've had a similar experience to Paola. I only speak English and Spanish really, but it's like learning Spanish and living in different Spanish speaking countries has been pretty important for my development as a person and as a coach and whatever else I do.
Yeah.
Being a human.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned like the personal level, because also, who you are as a person obviously interplays with the way you work, obviously. And so it's actually not to be underestimated, really.
Personal brand alert, isn't it now on LinkedIn? Everybody's talking about that. Personal brand.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that, but yeah, it ties in very nicely.
All right, great. Well, let's get cracking with some questions that I have. Paola's just really going to talk about some of the ways that being multilingual, speaking more than one language, and probably English is one of those if you're listening to this, 3 ways that being multilingual can benefit your career. What is the first way, Paola?
I found, for example, drawing on my own experience, but also on the experience of my clients over the years. When you are multilingual, one of the things that happens, especially if you work in an environment where daily or weekly you use several languages, code switching becomes really easy for you. Code switching means I'm having a conversation with Philip now, and then I talk on the phone in French and then go back to English talking to Philip. This is code switching. And it's something that is pretty difficult for people who are not used to, speaking several languages on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. And if you are multilingual, if you live a multilingual life, this will be easier for you. And what does this imply? First off, you can interact in their language, with people from an international team. And as we were saying, it's not to be underestimated, because when you it's kind of, I remember once, actually, this guy was an expert. I once met a hotel owner in Morocco who spoke 8 languages and quite well. And he was saying we had a talk about, multilingualism. And I asked him, like, what kind of advantage does this bring to you? And he was an Arabic and, an Arabic and French speaker as a native speaker, grew up bilingual. And he said, well, with some nationalities more than others, generally speaking to people in their own language really opens their hearts. And I was like, oh, that's so nice. And then he finished the sentence and he was like, and that makes them open their wallet. And I'm like, that's pragmatism.
Yeah.
Now, it's true though. He's a businessman, he's not sitting there in his hotel just to make friends. I mean, that's a nice side effect, but in the same way, if you have a meeting, or if you have to, be part of an international team, being able to crack a joke or to make a cultural reference to foreign, let's say, or people who speak other languages, members of the team, it will help the atmosphere. And everyone knows that, a relaxed atmosphere breeds better working conditions and therefore better results, because both you and I are against the whole idea of, working yourself to death and like just not having a good time while you work. And we don't like that. So if you want to contribute to creating a positive work environment, being multilingual actually can help, especially if you work in an international environment. It creates different relationships.
What would you say about, some of our listeners or some of the people tuning in might be working in English, like remotely, or want to work remotely? Mm-hmm. Is there a benefit or an opportunity to sort of learning more about the culture from Anglophone countries, or any kind of country where you're working with those people?
Wait, what? Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry. Like, do you mean for people who want to learn remotely, for them to learn about Anglophone countries, is what you said? Or did I misunderstand you?
So in
right
your
now?
example, the Moroccan businessman was talking to people who were coming to his country in their own language, and he had learned several. What about people who are living and maybe working remotely in their home country, but they speak English to a high level? How can they bridge that cultural gap? Is there a benefit to doing that?
Well, I mean, from the point of view of the person who wants to find a job, of course, it will open up so many opportunities. We were talking about, before, about job ads where people say, native speakers only, should we apply or not? Yes, you should totally apply. This will be good for the Anglophone culture too, is what I say. But I mean, that's me. Like, I've been teaching other people's languages for 20 years. So of course I apply. I think it's good both for the foreigner who is learning or working in English, and for the English speakers who receive this person into their team. Because, I mean, our brains love comfort. So I don't blame English speakers for not exactly being very proactive on learning other languages. And the problem with that is not a problem per se, but the thing is, if you only ever stay in one cultural space, you will never really get to know other environments, other cultural environments of the world. And it's really bad for you as a person, especially in an interconnected world like the one we live in today. It's really worth it. That's why it's heartbreaking, by the way, like not unrelated, but not completely, that so many universities in the UK are now closing down European study programs and foreign languages programs. And I'm like, no, no, this is exactly the opposite of what they should be doing. So basically, you bring the advantage of a different perspective. You bring the advantage also, I think, of understanding clients. Because sometimes, I'll just use myself as an example here, because I worked for quite a while. I worked as the liaison between an American company with offices in Spain, and I was working as a liaison with the German market. And German-speaking cultures are very different from Spanish culture and also from American culture. And I speak German, these people didn't. And there were some things that the German clients found really annoying that the American and Spanish employers didn't really understand were annoying for the Germans. So I explained it to them. And I knew it because I speak German, because I lived in Vienna, because I know certain things that are just really bothersome for them that are no big deal for a Spaniard or an American, for instance. And I think it's really important for all of us as multilingual people to be aware of this advantage and to be self-confident about it. Like, yeah, okay, English is my second language, but I got four more. What do you have? I mean, maybe not in these terms, but
It's such a good example about you like being the sort of bridging the gap between these cultures, because that's where the best career opportunities lie, is when there's a
yes,
space, there's a gap, and there's nothing there, there's no one there, no one else can do it, and you're like, this is me, I can do this. And I think that's where you have much more value than if you're in a space where there are 10,000 competitors and well, you have to run faster than them and jump higher than them to get the job or to show your value. If you aren't competing with people, that's something that language and cultural understanding can bring. So
yeah,
great point
definitely.
on that.
And I mean, like, to bring another example, I worked in Bangkok, and take my assistant. I had two different assistants. One of them was Filipina, and she spoke Tagalog and English. The second one was a young lady just graduated called Grace, who spoke Thai, Karen, which is an ethnic minority language in Thailand, English, and she was learning Spanish because she liked it. And this woman had so much understanding of Thailand and even of the small minorities from her area. And this was really important because we worked with families. And she explained so much stuff that I couldn't understand. Like, for example, we were working in a school and I was like, why don't they let these little kids walk? Like, it's bad for their health. And she was like, well, that's because in their tradition, yada, 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 yada. And she explained it to me and I got it. It sounds like something cultural and unrelated to work, but it isn't, because it tells you something about the culture you're working in. And if you understand the culture you're working in, you're going to be more successful at what you do. And people are going to like you more. And if people like you, you have more opportunities in life.
That's essentially it, isn't it? Like going back to the Moroccan businessman. If he's chatting in Italian to Italian visitors, they just like him more. Oh, Mohammed's great, isn't he? So, I mean,
Yes.
totally agree. I would say in the digital world as well, we're in the world of like remote work and forums, and people are working with teams. They may not be moving to another country to find this job. They might be, integrating like digitally. And it still applies. It's like language allows you to understand the culture of like, well, how long should it take to reply to someone? Or why have they get annoyed if you've used, the wrong sort of way to broach a subject, or you've been too direct or indirect, or, there's been some kind of delay.
For example, one thing that my German clients absolutely hated was being called for stupid stuff that was meaningless to them. But I had to do it because that's what the process told me I had to do. So I'm like, I'm so sorry to bother you, sir, blah, 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 blah. And I brought that to my manager and I said to him, look, I don't want to be annoying, but clients are unhappy about this and they perceive it as a waste of time, and they're very efficient people who hate wasting time. And they don't even need all this monitoring because they're German. They're doing everything correctly by the book. Could we please ditch this part of the process for these people? And the manager, in the end, he said yes. And they were much happier. And happy clients mean clients that stay with you and come back to you. And so, everyone was happy.
Great point. Just before you get onto your second way in which being multilingual is a benefit for your career, and I'm sure you've got loads more examples, I'll chip in with a couple of my thoughts. My experiences working with writers who are multilingual, writers who are using English professionally, maybe they're content writers, copywriters, but it's not their first language. And that has many advantages as I see it. I've talked about this a lot in the past. One of which is, we've sort of touched on the native, non-native thing. I know Paola mentioned that. The first thing to say is I don't think that writing like a native speaker is a good aim to have, because it's not attainable and it's not necessarily beneficial. Like, aim to be proficient and just accept and change your mindset so that you can see being multilingual as benefit, because it really is. So that's my first sort of tip. As for how it is a benefit, I've got quite a lot of notes and points mentioned here. I'll just talk about one of them now. You're a dedicated learner. Like, if you've learned English to a high level through whatever means, it shows that you have the ability to do that with other subjects. And, for many of the professionals in the US and England that don't really have to learn a language, well, they might not be capable of dedicating themselves and like having to struggle and fail and jump through these hoops. So I think it shows you, as somebody who's dedicated, you can do that with writing craft. You can do it with SEO. You can do it with, learning how to run a solo business. Like, whatever it is, you have the ability to dedicate yourself to upskilling how you need to. So that's one of the ways that I've seen it. It really is a benefit to have learned a language.
Yeah, definitely. May I just mention one of the comments that came in? I was having a look while you were talking.
Yeah, of course.
Anna, I don't know if she's still here, but I met Anna in a course we had together, and she's an Argentinian lady who has moved to Switzerland for several reasons, and she's also an English teacher. And what she's saying there is fundamental. She already spoke French, and that made her life easier, because that's kind of what we were saying before. Being multilingual opens doors because you make friends, you feel cozy, and when you feel cozy and comfortable in your daily life, and may I add, in your job, and get liked by people, again, the Moroccan businessman knows where it's at. People will like you. You will feel more comfortable. People will find you more likable, and then things will happen, because that's just how it is. And so I think what Anna said, I totally agree with it. It's also my experience as somebody who's moved 5 times in like 2 different countries.
Yeah, just to finish off that comment from Anna, if you can't see it in the comments because it's been cut off by the streaming software, it says start by making friends and feeling cozy in your daily life, shopping, visits to doctors, etc. Just if everyone wants to know.
Yeah, because great. That's the thing. Like, a lot of the time, one of the reasons why you will find yourself working in an international environment is that maybe you emigrated. Like, maybe you didn't find a remote job, as you were mentioning, which is a pretty new option. But maybe you decided to move from southern Spain to Germany, to the UK or Scandinavia, for example, in Scandinavia, it's very common to just go through your whole daily life at work in English, or in the Netherlands, it's the same. So,
But
the,
interestingly, just to interject, interestingly, in those cultures, like the type of English that you're using is kind of different because, like Dutch people are quite famous for being very direct or saying what they mean,
yes,
and British people are famous for completely the opposite. So you might have learned this really high level, like indirect, like, oh, I was wondering if it would be possible to provide some feedback on this, and they'd be like, what is this person saying? So like if you, wherever you apply the language that you've learned, cultural understanding is an
oh
integral
yeah.
part of succeeding in any role.
That's definitely that's what we were saying. I mean, like English and any language really comes with a certain culture attached to it, but English is special because it's so widespread and so widely used by so many people that there was kind of a split between the cultures that come with it, because there's more, obviously more than one, and so many varieties of it. And well, there is this kind of international English, this globish, some people call it, and a lot of the time, actually, that's another thing I often say to my clients. Remember that a lot of the time you will find yourself speaking English in a situation where non-native speakers are the majority. So that that brings me to another thing I wanted to mention, which is the idea of clarity. So because you are working with a learned language, a lot of the time, if you have to prepare a presentation, or if you have to, well, do pretty much anything, a call or whatever, you kind of tend to plan more than you would in your native language, where you feel you could just like surf the wave and just go with the flow. But that might give you an advantage because a lot of the time, like native speakers aren't aware of how unclear they can sound, because they're not used to not understanding others, because everybody's always adapting to their language, which is English anyway. So, I mean, it's not really, yeah, I will mention the example I gave you before about my friend at work. I had a French friend who worked in Thailand in an office, and one day she was like sitting with her lunchbox at her desk, and her boss, her Australian boss, says, "Hey, so what's on your plate today?" And my friend was like, "Pasta." Like, are you stupid? Are you blind? Like, why are you asking me this? And he obviously meant, like, what do you need to do today? What's on the menu for your activities? Like, what do you need? What problems need solving today? And this is just a tiny example of the kind of breakdown that can happen if you are not really aware of the language. And this is something that does not really happen to non-native speakers, because we are used to having to making ourselves understood. And that's an advantage, actually. Clarity is good. Simplicity is good. Even if it may not sound cool, it actually is.
I mean, there's a time and a place for beautiful, flowing, long sentences and academic vocabulary and stuff. But in the world in which we live now, where time is precious and everybody wants to get their message across in a clear and efficient way, it is a massive advantage. And I think if you can take the brevity of English and apply it to your own first language, you get a career benefit, right? Like, I've got a lot of clients who are Spanish, Portuguese speakers, and they say to me, oh, well, after taking your course, I know how to cut this stuff down, and I could write, rather than a 4-page report, I could write a 2-page report, and my boss would be happy with that because it has got the same
Yes.
information. Or, delivering like a speech, like you say, like a presentation. If you can be shorter in a more powerful way, if it's direct and clear with the language that you use, you can apply that to your own language too, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's actually something. I mean, I've been writing and studying and working with English for a long, long time, since I was a kid. And over the years, I became better and better at it. And as an adult, I noticed what you were saying, that simplicity and, like not non-subordinated 4-line sentences are good in English. And I come from a language which is very flowery and very beautiful and really annoying to read when you're trying to work. So I totally confirm what your clients say, because my writing in Italian has become a lot cleaner as well. But, that's not necessarily on topic. But, oh yeah, David, yes, we love clarity and simplicity. And as a Spanish speaker, I think you also know what I'm talking about. That clarity and simplicity are kind of underrated in Latin countries. Like, people, when they write and when they speak, they tend to, love flowery expressions, but sometimes they just make communication really unclear. I
Let's.
also,
Yeah, sorry. Go
sorry,
ahead.
I just wanted to ask you if you had seen Stefan's comment about untranslatable words.
Yeah, let's put that on screen. I wasn't sure if it fitted into what we were talking about, but yeah, let's let everyone see that.
Because actually he is a good example of somebody who made it in another language in his case. And he's a Romanian person who found work in a German speaking environment. And he, I think that his multilingualism has brought him a lot, because, well, I mean, we talked about this. He was sharing it actually with the American team, what he's saying here about untranslatable words, and people were mind blown, because sometimes I think people, American and English speakers in general, sometimes forget that there's a whole wide world outside that has great ideas. And you, well, you, not you, but you listeners and viewers now, you can bring those untranslatable words and new ideas into the workplace and blow people's minds. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, yeah, if you've got any other success stories, everybody watching, about, and maybe an example of when you were able to do something like that, or a success where you've worked in another country, or how your language learning and your various languages have brought you success, then yeah, let us know. And don't forget, if you've got any questions, just type them in. We'll get to them at the end. I was wondering if we could bring up grammar. I'm not one to talk about grammar very much, but as you were talking, I thought, if we learn a language, and we often learn it as teens or adults, or when we're a bit older, and we're more cognizant of like learning grammar, because in our first languages we learn it as young kids. That gives you the ability to, especially in English, to know how to manipulate words and sentences. English is very malleable. It's very, we can change things around. So we can change a long sentence into a short one without really losing much meaning, or we can, switch the emphasis by changing clauses or whatever. Just a thought, really, that's another advantage. Like, if you're able to do that in English, you can apply that to your own language. You can understand how it has an impact on the kind of things that you write and say and deliver as well. So yeah, just wanted to get your thoughts on, is learning grammar in a foreign language, is that an advantage, and how?
Well, I personally think it is, especially when you have to write, because writing, writing emails is pretty fundamental in most workplaces. And also now there's a lot more written channels than before. There's chat, there's Slack, there's Teams, there's so much, right? And of course there you won't write in perfect grammar, but sorry, I was reading Radu's comment.
No, well, let's hide that, and we'll come back to you, Radu, who has a question.
Oh, okay,
So we'll come back to you later.
okay.
Interrupted you there.
No, it's fine. So I think it is definitely an advantage. And actually, when I work as a neurolanguage coach, we always also devote time to language mechanics, because being aware of the way you kind of just open the hood and see how this topic X works. It is important to be aware of it. It's not good to just do that and then never speak. Like the two things kind of go hand in hand. But I think more than anything, for me personally, in my experience, what is important is to use the language. Use it in every possible way. Read a lot, listen a lot, watch Netflix, speak, find occasions and chances to speak, write, and use tools to help you write properly. Because if you do all that and then you also learn mechanics and grammar next to that, then you're going to become very good, because form and expression go together. But I don't like any kind of extreme. I don't think it's effective to just learn grammar, because actually that's the people who come to me. A lot of my clients are very good at giving you a conference on the usage of the present perfect versus the past simple and the way they are formed. And then you tell them, okay, well, let's have a chat. And they're like, oh, no, I'm too shy to do that. No, I'm not good enough, or I don't want to. And then what did you learn all that for? Right?
Yeah, I agree.
So you have to find a balance. And I'm happy. That's kind of what I do, actually. I try to okay, let's move away from the conference about English grammar. Let's get away from knowing about English, and let's move into actually using English and play with it, actually.
It's important to understand, but it's certainly not my approach, and I don't believe in learning all the theory first and then trying to apply it, because with writing, with grammar, with any skill, it doesn't work. So what, you're going to read 10,000 songs of sheet music before you pick up a guitar and play the chords? No, you got to make it, start with a few mangled notes and chords and improve that way.
Yeah. Well, that touches on a subject that's very important, and I'll just try to say it in a nutshell. But what you just said about the mangled notes, that's very important. To do anything, also, speak English and anything, you need to be willing to suck at it at first, and not let your being terrible at something touch your self-esteem and make you say stuff like, I'm terrible at this, because being really bad at something is part of the process. Nobody is Mozart, really.
Yeah, Maria's got an interesting comment here. Hi, Maria. Thanks for coming along. Maria, I think you're a translator, right? Or you operate in that world, which is definitely more the technical side of language, and the accuracy side of language is important. But yeah, just a good point there. That finishes just by saying, and you end up being completely misunderstood. Yeah, it can happen. I suppose I mean, often we're talking with languages here about learning as an adult, right? And most language learners do start and get the grammar input as kids or first off. I think there's definitely a disconnect between trying to do that as an adult and doing it as a kid. I do believe we need that kind of input, but as an adult, it's not something that motivates us to continue in that, to continue on that journey of improving a language. Super interesting as this discussion is, I feel like we may be getting away from the career benefits side of things. Let's touch on that, and we will get to your comments and questions if we haven't yet. I know we've got a couple that we're going to come back to. Is there another benefit, a career benefit that you haven't touched on that you wanted to talk about?
I mean, it's a pretty concrete one, actually, and I don't know if it applies all over Europe, but I'm pretty sure it does apply in many countries. And that is actually in a lot of larger multinational companies, the more languages you speak, And so the more customers you can actually help with, especially if you're working with sales or customer service, which is where a lot of multilingual people find work, you're going to get paid more. There's a lot of companies actually have bonuses for like demonstrated language proficiency. So that could perhaps be a good idea, a good reason for getting some sort of certification that you speak a certain language at a certain level, because, well, obviously they will see it on the job, but if you have some sort of paperwork demonstrating your competence, you can actually use it to have your employer open his wallet as well as his heart, to go back to the Moroccan businessman. And
Finally, a good use for language certifications.
I know, right? It just came to mind. I was like, actually, bonuses are nice. Language bonuses are a thing, especially for any German speakers watching. Everybody needs you guys. Like, if you speak good German and good English, there's a lot of, and not necessarily German as native speakers. I mean, any Germans. I'm not a German native speaker, and still I found so many jobs with that. So that's a great advantage. Like, what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that speaking English as a non-native speaker plus another language or more at a high level is really, really a superpower. You can beat the competition simply because you can cover more markets in a multilingual environment like Europe. Of course, I'm talking from the perspective of a European. When I lived in Southeast Asia, the fact that I spoke German didn't really matter so much. But I saw the advantage when I came back here, that speaking languages that cover most of Europe, that's a plus.
Sounds like, the more you build your profile, the more unique you become. All these combinations of languages and experience, you become uniquely you. Like,
Yeah.
that's something I wanted to talk about. Maybe this is not the cleanest segue, but I had a point that I wanted to make about sort of unique voice, which is that, wherever you come from, and I'm speaking to mostly writers here, or people who are maybe translators or work in content or need to like sell their own services, it's a real benefit where you come from, because it makes you uniquely you. Like, you can build that kind of brand, or show a side of you and your culture which is different from just another writer using English, right? You are from wherever you're from, and if you can use that like unique voice, speaking in a localized way, like I would say, as someone who's learned Spanish, like, my Britishness is interesting to Spaniards, and my understanding of another language and like my living in Spain is interesting to Brits, and it's sort of works both ways. Of like, I sort of incorporate it in some ways into my writing, and when I talk about myself, other than just understanding other people, it's about like setting out who you are. And yeah, in this world of personal branding and whatnot, I
I
think it's
was
really
gonna say
important.
that was a personal branding moment, actually.
Oh,
Personal
so I'm
branding
talking about
alert.
personal branding without saying it. I swore I'd never become one of these personal branding people.
You didn't do
But
it.
however you want to use the term or not, if you want to get a job, if you want to get noticed, if you want to get published, if you want to, get a promotion or something, being who you are and being confident about that, and showing your unique voice is important. And I think where you come from and your first language is a massive part of that. So that's my advice to writers out there, is like, yes, you can use, you might have a better understanding of global English and plain English. That's one advantage. But yeah, you also have that localized way of
Yes.
speaking and like understanding, and your unique background. So use both of those to give yourself an advantage. Don't try and blend in. Like, be where you come from and who you are.
Yeah, of course, especially think about all thinking about, writers, anybody who works in marketing or sales, when you create a message, if you have, people always say you got to know your audience. Well, and who better than somebody who speaks the language of that audience? In Europe, we speak so many languages, so you are automatically at an advantage because you got the key to three worlds, three, four, five linguistic different worlds. And I mean, that's great, especially because with one person, especially if you speak them at higher levels, um, the employers and managers will see that advantage once they work with you. I think, I don't know if you feel the same, but when you talk to people, the main problem is at the hiring stage, because then once you're in, managers and your collaborators, they see why it's good that you speak so many languages. They actually see you solving problems that they didn't even know they were there. Ah, Francesca, what is she saying? Good to hear, which half of my life learned. Yeah, well, call me, Francesca, whenever you like. Or Philip, depending on whether you want to speak or write. You can call both of us.
A little mid webinar plug there. Yeah, great. We're going to get to your comments and questions in a minute. Paola, any final thoughts on anything that we've talked about, or anything that you haven't said yet about other advantages that being multilingual gives you?
Well, maybe it's important. I mean, it's good that we are here talking about this, because I think that a lot of people are really unaware of the fact that it's an advantage. Like, this very topic should be talked about more, because it can be so hostile out there. It's a paradox, but the business world can be actually very hostile to multilingual people, because the business world is very much English language focused. And sometimes it can be perceived as hostile by people trying to enter it who are multilingual. So I think that even just having a chat like this, or your posts that people read, or what I also write about this, like making people aware of the fact that it's not necessarily a disadvantage, even if it may feel like it. It's very helpful, because self-awareness, I talk about it all the time, but it's really important to know for yourself that this is a plus. Because if you know it, you will go into the job interview with another attitude than if you are sitting outside of the door of the job interview room and you're like, oh my God, will I speak well enough? Will I sound, well, I don't sound like a native speaker. Who cares? It's fine. Your accent is part of your story. If you can have a conversation, actually find ways to slip the topic of your multilingualism in there and say, yeah, well, when I was working in blah, 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 we did this and that. Like, talk about it. It's a strength. You should be proud of it, is what I think.
Great point. And to the writers in the or watching, I'd say the same. You might think, oh, it's not 100% accurate, or there may be some differences between what I would write and a native speaker, but capitalize on those. Like, tell your story and include, if you're submitting to a publication where you can include more about your opinion, like where you come from. That's such a strength. That's what people are looking for nowadays, like a unique viewpoint, more diverse types of writing and stories. So just be confident in yourselves that you're awesome.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
All right, let's get to some of these comments. If you've got any other comments or questions, let us know. Let's first have this comment from Anna. I don't think we showed this one. This touched on what we were talking about earlier with English being a bit more of a simply formed language, or we tend to use clear, brief sentences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that finishes off just saying the level is you need to use complex grammar at the expense of meaning. Yes. It's
It's the
kind
same
of
with Italian. Yeah.
counterintuitive, isn't it? It's like once we get to a higher level, and a lot of what I teach is not, this is the right word or this is the correct use of grammar. It's like you can be grammatically perfect and accurate, but let's be effective. And what is effective in English, whether it's speaking or writing, and when it's producing the language, is generally like more crystallized and distilled thought. That's what we value. He
Yeah.
says, waffling on the 1 hour webinar. Yeah.
Uh, oh, LinkedIn user, we don't know who it is. Glad to see you. And we talked about, oh, did you see David's? Okay.
I'll bring up David's comment in a minute. Hi,
Okay.
LinkedIn user. Yeah, we can't see who you are, but maybe you're not a connection of ours. Radu's comment about thinking in another language. That's interesting. Does that happen to you,
I
Paola?
think the funny thing that happens is I think in the language I'm speaking at, yeah, all the time, especially with swearing.
That's so true. I swear in Spanish more than I swear in English.
Do you
It's like a
know?
cheat code, isn't it? It's like, well, if I'm
Ah,
saying it in
yeah.
Spanish, I'm not really being so rude.
I used to, like, my mind used to think and swear a lot more in English when I spoke English 24/7 living in Thailand. Now that I live in Spain, it switched to Spanish a lot more. That was yeah, but I think that's a good sign, by the way. I think it was Radu who wrote it. I think that's a good sign. That's good.
Yeah, great. I think Anna had another comment about grammar. Maybe we can bring that one up again and then talk about David's question. Or David, sorry.
There's a tendency in adults to think that grammar is the core.
To finish that off, it says to reverse that, using the language, like Paola says, is a good starting point. Listening to Netflix podcasts, I side with that.
Yeah, I mean that's what I always, talk about is like you need to use English as well. I mean, I will never say that grammar doesn't count for anything because we don't want to, especially again, if you have to write, it's really important to know what you're doing. But at the same time, it shouldn't be so important to stop you from doing anything because you're like, oh, this is too hard. Let me just have deeply.com translate it for me and then hope it's okay because I'm not good enough at it. But that's a problem with grammar.
Yeah.
Also, like uh, even, we even don't call it grammar anymore because grammar actually, for a lot of learners and a lot of people, it kind of triggers a limbic reaction of, oh my God. Like a limbic reaction means your brain goes into fight or flight mode. And specifically, this means, oh my God, grammar, boom, shut down, boring, don't want to do it. This
I
is
mean, that's true of pretty much everything nowadays. We're bombarded with so much information that our initial reaction to anything is like, so what? Why should I care? And if you say, here are the building blocks for something, you're like, you've got to make me care about how to build it or why I should build it or what it is first, rather than saying, like, here's a bunch of, parts of speech. So I totally understand that reaction and
yeah.
think grammar shouldn't stop you from writing, and it shouldn't make you use a translation app because you're going to get wonky words and sentences which aren't effective. So like, I prefer to sort of deconstruct things, look at what works and then why does it work, and that's something people can reverse engineer without needing to know tons of theory first.
Yeah. And with speaking, it's also very damaging. I mean, I hate to, I don't want to sound like those people who will tell you, oh, that grammar doesn't matter, whatever. It does. Speaking correctly is good because it gives you authority. Of course, that it's a really important point because when you are a non-native speaker, you feel like if you listen to yourself making a mistake in grammar and you know that you've made it, that will also cause a limbic reaction of, oh my god, panic, and that will disrupt your flow when you're talking, and that's good for nobody. And it's also not good because if you are freaking out inside, you will not sound as good as you would have if you didn't, and that will undermine your authority. So that's why it's so important to always be, again, it goes back to the self-awareness. Like, you need to be aware that it's a strength to have many languages within you and access to so many linguistic worlds. You need to be aware that you will be maybe imperfect, but you will be communicating. But don't let that imperfection make you freak out, because then you will sound less authoritative than you could, right?
And and going back to our theme of like careers, career advantages, making this work for you, it's about the results that you get. It's about the
Yeah.
if you're in a negotiation or you're giving a speech or something like that, to a certain extent, accuracy is important. You need to be well understood. But if you get a couple of words around the wrong way, but you give an inspiring message, which, builds the value of what you're selling or what you're doing, or launches a project, like, that's far more important than whether those two words were around the right way, or whether you've used a question mark or not. It's like, we got to think about results, people.
Yeah, and to do that, you have to cultivate your self-esteem in a way, and be gentle to yourself, because otherwise you'll just beat yourself up over nothing, really, and that distracts you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of distractions, we've got this comment from David about AI. I feel like that could definitely be another whole webinar. I did one the other month with Shamila Iya, where we touched on AI. That's more for writing, not so much about the language field, but it would definitely be really interesting to see more language professionals and translators talking about the impact of AI, because it's been a crazy year, 2023, and we've had to understand a lot and change what we're doing, but it's certainly something which is impacting like every field, and we should be talking about that too.
We are looking forward to your webinar about that. I don't know enough to talk about it, but I can come listen.
David, are you doing a webinar about that? Or are you talking about my webinar?
No, about your webinar, Philip.
I've already done one. I did one
Oh, yeah,
where we
but this
talked about
changes every few months.
human writing. If anyone out there is an AI expert, much more than me, because ChatGPT and I are not good friends, apart from sometimes it makes some funny pictures of like owls and badgers for me, but apart from that, I don't use it that much. So if there's any experts out there and they want to chat, then hit me up. Thanks so much for coming along, everyone. I think we should wrap up, because we've been chatting for an hour and it's flown by. Yeah, thanks. It's been great to see you all here. If you want to get in touch with me, then just contact me via LinkedIn, English Writing Coach, or you can email me at phil@englishwritingcoach.uk. And yeah, you might want to get in touch with me if you are multilingual and you use English professionally to write, and you want to write effectively. That's what I help people with. Paola, where can people find you, and why should they get in touch with you?
All right. Well, mostly they can find me hanging out on LinkedIn, talking about crisps with Philip in the morning. You can find me as Paola Natalucci, that's UCCI at the end, but you can see it from the event page as well on LinkedIn, or you can send me an email at paola@flowinenglish.com if you need any information. All of this information is also on my LinkedIn page. And you should get in touch with me if you are one of those people who can tell us all about the present perfect and then hides in a corner if they're asked to speak English, not because they can't, but because they think they can't. But you don't know that it's you're thinking that. So we need to talk about that. And that's the coaching bit.
What have you got against the present perfect? You're
Because
very anti-present perfect.
I am very much. Do you know how many people suffer because of using the how to use the present perfect versus present simple, simple past in English?
Yeah.
It's a very painful topic for a lot of people. I didn't know that.
Even Americans and Brits don't agree on that one, right? So
That's what I tell them. I'm like, even the Americans and Brits have been fighting about it for 50 years. So don't worry about it, you know? It's very confusing for learners, what you just mentioned, actually.
yeah, I get it. All right. Well, if you're having problems with the present perfect, contact Paola. And it will be good to see some of you on LinkedIn. Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone, and your
Thank
great
you.
comments and questions. And yeah, that's it for this time. I'll be back in January with another event, and hope you have a great end of the year.
Same for me. Merry Christmas. And well, if you're going out to buy presents now, don't get hurt because there's a lot of people out there. It's very crowded. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to Philip as well. Thanks for
And to you
hosting
too,
me on
Paola.
your pre-Christmas chat.
Yeah, it's been fun. Great chatting with you. See you next time, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.